And joining me now is Democratic Senator Cory Booker of New Jersey. Senator, thank you for spending part of this weekend with us. And I want to start with the big news about the FBI interview. If an indictment is handed down before the election, if Hillary Clinton were to be formally charged with a crime, should she step aside in favor of Bernie Sanders or even Vice President Biden?
Well, first of all, that's just not going to happen. I think we've already seen a lot of the evidence and the facts here. The emails have come out. Today's interview is not something to signal that. This is something that she voluntarily did, that last summer she really wanted to do. So I think this is something that's just routine, and we're going to be seeing an investigation closing up. And I think she, like most Americans, wants this thing to be concluded and so we can move beyond it and focus on the real issues of this campaign.
But technically, it could happen. And if it did, should she step aside?
Well, again, technically, you and I could be as well investigated.
Probably more likely if we were being investigated that we would be indicted. But should she step aside if there is some finding?
Well, again, that's something that to me is not even within the realm of possibility.
Okay, I want to ask you about another controversy. This one sparked by former President Clinton. This week he met privately with Attorney General Loretta Lynch, who is the official overseeing this investigation of Hillary Clinton's private email server. Lynch acknowledged that this meeting has cast a shadow over the investigation. Those are her words. She did decline to recuse herself. I wonder, do you think that she needs to recuse herself?
She's a long-standing professional. She came up through the ranks at the Justice Department. I think she's handling this right. She did nothing wrong, no violation, and she already said publicly that she's going to abide by the determination of the FBI and the prosecutors that are working on this case.
Let's look at this notion that she will simply be accepting the recommendations or abiding by them, as you say, of the FBI and the career prosecutors. Here's what she said.
And I fully expect to accept their recommendations, and I will be accepting their recommendations.
So which is it here, that she fully expects to, or that she will accept the recommendations?
Well, I think that she is going to accept the recommendations. And again, let's understand what this is all about. This is about a conversation that the two of them had that had nothing to do with this case, that had to do with golf and grandchildren. So this is nothing that in any way undermines this case. And people who are alleging that, and I know a lot of that's coming from the Trump campaign, are trying to whip up conspiracy theories here. This is a professional prosecutor. She knows what she's doing. And she has said it has the appearance of impropriety, but nothing happened. And as a result of that, she's going to accept the determination of the prosecutors working on this case.
Muddying the waters a little bit on whether she will simply accept these recommendations after she suggested she will be taking a step back from the investigation and just accepting this. The Justice Department spokeswoman clarified her remarks. She told Yahoo News that, quote, the Attorney General will be the ultimate decider. So how can you maintain that you are just accepting the recommendations? And also, there is this suggestion that she is the ultimate decider. These seem to be two very different things.
I think we're really parsing things, that there's a distinction, but not much of a difference. The reality is this is a professional, lifelong prosecutor who had a conversation with a guy who, frankly, one of the things we love about Bill Clinton, he's probably one of the friendliest people on the planet Earth. They talked about golf and grandchildren. In no way undermine the investigation. One conversation from a professional prosecutor is going to have no implication on this at all. I'm happy she's staying in the saddle. I'm happy that she's not recusing herself, but she is making sure that she's going to focus on the recommendations of the professionals that are involved here.
Why is there a revision, though, coming from her department that she is the ultimate decider instead of backing up her assertion that she's going to accept these recommendations?
Again, at a time where we've had global terror, at a time that we have real issues in communities like the one I'm going to be going home to today, this is the kind of things I think more frustrates voters than it does interest them. This is a distinction with barely a difference. The reality is this is a prosecutor who America can trust, who came up through the ranks and is going to do a good job with this case.
So back in 2003, when George W. Bush was president, Attorney General John Ashcroft recused himself from the Valerie Plame case. This was because of his long-standing relationship with Bush advisor Karl Rove, and he wanted to avoid even the appearance of a conflict of interest. Why doesn't the same standard apply here?
you're going a lot far back into history with a case that I'm not truly familiar with, so I can't make a distinction there.
I want to turn now to the global war on terrorism. Gunmen seized a bakery in the Bangladeshi capital of Dhaka on Friday. They killed 20 hostages, 2 police officers in this hours-long standoff that ended Saturday morning. This follows terror attacks in Istanbul and Orlando that killed dozens upon dozens of people. How would Hillary Clinton's response to terrorism be different from that of President Obama?
Well, I think the distinction here, she's not running against President Obama, she's running against Donald Trump. And we know already what Donald Trump has said he was going to do, which is undermine key alliances like the NATO alliance, which helps us to protect not only our country, but really fight against the war on terror. He wants to go against Muslims and create relationships, in fact, denigrate relations with Muslim countries, which include countries like Turkey, which I was in meeting with President Erdogan back in January, and already leaders there are worried about Trump and our relationship. And he wants to go back to doing things that are outrageous, from saying, hey, we're going to go after the families of terrorists, we're going to bring back torture. Donald Trump is dangerous and would make this world far more dangerous place. And in fact, he would undermine many of the things that are in place right now that would make us a much safer country.
We learned more about Donald Trump's vice presidential search this week. One of the names under consideration is New Jersey Governor Chris Christie. You're very familiar with him. The two of you have worked pretty closely together on the issue of education. Would Chris Christie make a good vice president?
Look, as you know, Chris Christie and I, even though we're different parties, and I can write a long dissertation on our disagreements, when I was the mayor of the largest city in the state and he was governor, we found ways to work together. But frankly, I don't care who you put with Donald Trump. You're not going to find a good partnership to lead this country, especially someone who has consistently demeaned Americans, degraded Americans, and deceived Americans in just about his entire campaign. If I turn on the news in any given week, he's demeaning and degrading and deceiving another group of Americans. And whether it's Muslim Americans or whether it's judges, whether it's people like John McCain.
But Chris Christie, you're more obviously comfortable with him.
I'm telling you right now, I don't care who Donald Trump picks. This is somebody that's a danger not only to our country, but his recklessness, his disregard, his demeaning and degrading of other individuals will put this planet in peril. This is a dangerous man, and I've heard what's come out of his mouth, and it's frankly frightening about what could happen if he was the commander-in-chief of this country and had his finger, had the codes to the nuclear weapons.
2 weeks ago, you said you were not being vetted to be Hillary Clinton's vice presidential running mate. Is that still the case? Has your staff provided any personal documents to the Clinton campaign?
You know, at this point, I've answered this question, talked about this. I'm just referring questions about the vice presidency to the woman that's going to have to make this decision. You should talk to the Hillary Clinton campaign. What I do know is that on the Democratic side, there are many fabulous candidates, people that could really be strong vice presidential candidates.
That is not a no, sir. That is not a no.
That is exactly what it is. It's telling you that if you have a question like that, please direct it to the Clinton campaign.
I think I may have gotten the answer that I need from that, actually. But I want to ask you about Bill Daley, the former White House chief of staff under President Obama. He had some pretty tough words for Bernie Sanders in a Washington Post op-ed. He wrote, "Since when does the runner-up get to continue to enjoy Secret Service protection at taxpayers' expense?" I want to ask you about that Secret Service protection. This is something that comes at a huge cost to taxpayers, $38,000 a day. Is this appropriate for Bernie Sanders to continue to receive this?
What's appropriate is we keep Americans safe. And there are a lot of people on the Hill who at times might have death threats or other security issues that we're not aware of. I leave that to the professionals. I don't think there should be a chance to pick on Bernie Sanders. I'm confident with the focus that he's been in the public eye, there might be things going on with his security that we're not aware of. So we should leave that alone. Let's just focus on issues that matter.
Senator Booker, thanks so much for being with us, and a happy 4th to you.
Thank you very much. All the best.